Can you start to see bits of the picture yet? Hopefully, for the young people in particular, you're starting to see the story come together. The time when we're taken away and we're just gone. We're just gone. And the newspapers, where did they go? No one knows. That's strange cult anyway. I always thought they were really quiet. Disappeared on a Sunday morning, but they were nice. Strange though, really. They put leaflets in our letterbox every 6 months for years. They were weird, but it's always the nice ones, isn't it? And for a little period of time, it'll be front page news and then gone. Someone will do something weird and famous and strange and we won't be front page anymore and we'll be forgotten. Until the world goes madder and madder and then Russia's coming and the march south and we're involved and hopefully we can start to see that picture now forming, that vast metal soldier astride the globe and a stone twisting and tumbling, falling faster and faster. At first it looks like a shepherd's pebble, small, but as it comes, it grows and it grows and it smashes, it tumbles, it falls, it hits those fragile feet. Can you hear the crunching and the splintering and the screeching off the splinters of metal in those feet? And as the feet shatter, the image topples slowly at first and then faster and faster, smashing into the earth into pieces like Dagon's image, like Ozymandias' statue. Broken pieces in the desert, and then that stone somehow grinds to powder and a wind comes whistling through the plain, and before you know it, there's nothing left but the stone, and the stone is still growing and it's growing and it's growing, and it's not a stone when you look at it and you think, oh, that's scary, there's a weird dream. Yes, it's a weird dream, but the stone you get a sense of confidence and of warmth and of safety as that stone grows and grows and grows, and our view pans out and we can see the whole world, and somehow, despite the wrongness of this geometry, that stone fills the world. I don't know how it does it on a globe, but it does. Can you see it? Are you finding, I really hope you are finding building material for your visions in what we're talking about. The Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca said this: to the person who does not know where he wants to go, there is no favorable wind. We've got to know where we want to go. And young people particularly, you don't have to understand every single thing we've said here, but get a picture. Let this be the start. You will build extra things onto your vision throughout your life. But we have to be able to see over the horizon of our noisy now to the future that God has in store. And we have to set our course that way. Or as someone else said, we go where our vision is. If your vision is to do with the things that are in a mire, or it's in a car dealership somewhere, or it's online, and that's your vision, that's where you're going. And that's not us. That's not who we are. Well, last session we touched on the building madness, the madness that leads all the world to Armageddon. And while we named just a few of the protagonists in that war, we know that all nations, one way or the other, will be represented there. They will all at some level witness the arrival of the great king and his saints. You can guarantee the angels are going to ensure that there is somebody from every sovereign nation on the planet who can send word back and say what happened so that they will know. Perhaps they'll be there as part of a UN delegation. Perhaps they'll be as allies in this newly polarized world that we face. But all nations will know that our God, He is Yahweh. And even the billions who do not march into this theater of conflict under one of the banners of the kingdom of men will know unquestionably that something awe-inspiring has occurred. The day of Yahweh, of armies shall be upon everyone that is proud and lofty. You think about our world. Who's proud and lofty? And it's not just names like Trump and Kamala Harris and Albanese and the rest, but it's also people like Bezos and Musk and Gates and so many others, a world full of people so proud of who they are and of what they have done. They are lifted up, but they're going to be brought low. You might think you can send a Tesla to Mars, but that is not the answer to this problem. And they shall go into the holes of the rock and into the caves of the earth for the fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty when he arises to shake terribly the earth. They'll all know, from Argentina to Iceland, they will know. Come back to where we were at the end of our last session, please. Zechariah chapter 14. Because Zechariah chapter 14 describes that bit, doesn't it? It describes the moment when the angels, the name-bearing angel, the Yahweh angel's feet touch the Mount of Olives. Verse 4, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives will be rent in this tearing convulsion that contorts the earth. And we read how the earth reels, and as the earth is reeling and there's this massive grinding, crashing, smashing, a mountain torn in half. And it's not just split in half, but there's this yawning division that opens out into a wide plain. This is some earthquake. Just as that happens, as people see the epicenter, they can see the angel on the crest of that hill outside Jerusalem. Just as that happens, at the end of verse 5, Zechariah says, and Yahweh my God shall come. Not him, not the him angel of verse 4, but the Yahweh my God shall come, and all the saints with you. Who is that? Who is Zechariah's Yahweh? The one that Zechariah has a personal relationship with. Who the saints, that's our Lord. The great King. He arrives at Jerusalem. We said in the last session that we're going to spend a little bit of time on the earthquake. Now, technically, I don't want to confuse anyone. The earthquake occurs before the hail bit, right? Technically. But I just want to flesh out that earthquake just a little bit more and make sure we understand how it works. It occurs before the saints enter the fray in the mountains around Jerusalem. Now, most of us are aware that the lowest point on the earth's surface is the Dead Sea. It's an absolute feature in terms of global tectonics. The Jordan Valley is this very, very clear shear line, this rift between two of the massive plates in this, that show the fault lines of this shattered globe that we live on. Running north to south, the Dead Sea Transform System, or the Dead Sea Rift as it's known, is a series of faults that run all of the way from a vast fault junction up in Turkey down towards Africa. And it's made as a consequence of the vast stresses and strains that are exerted by the African plate on which all of Africa is built. And the Arabian plate, one of the most significant plates in the world, and the Eurasian plates, and they all crash into each other at Israel, give or take. These massive floating ships of stone, floating on seas of turbulent molten magma boiling up from deep in the earth, are grinding, smashing into each other oh so strongly and oh so slowly right there. And the scientist tells us that there is enormous built-up stress and pressure in these fault lines just waiting to be released. They can measure how much is built up there and how big an earthquake there would be if it released at any one point. But the amazing thing is that, okay, you can look at a map and you see this, where the Jordan River runs, that's the line, the fault, the crack between plates and this massive transform system. But perpendicular to that is another fault line. So this is a bit hard to see. This is a geological map of Jerusalem. It was produced by the Israeli Geological Society about a year ago. And I've taken the liberty of drawing on it so that you can see the Mount of Olives. Now, that squiggly brown line, the Mount of Olives is not, in fact, a single mountain. It's a ridge outside Jerusalem. And the line of mark there is pretty much the line of that ridge. And this map only extends a little way outside Jerusalem, but it shows all the fault lines, and one of the major ones runs right through the middle of that ridgeline. And in exactly the direction we would expect, based on what it says back there in Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 4 and 5, the mountain will cleave in the midst towards the east and towards the west, and then be pushed both north and south. An earthquake will come that will tear that ridgeline in half. And furthermore, it won't just tear it in half. Zechariah 14 tells us that it's going to create a great wide plain. Or you could say it differently. Here's what it says in Isaiah. Tophet, a valley near Jerusalem, is ordained of old. For the king it's prepared. He's made it deep and large because it's going to be a place of judgment. And the whole topography of the land of Israel will be transformed in this vast earthquake and the events that follow. Verse 10, it says, all the land shall be turned as a plain. Turned, that's a Hebrew word that means flattened. It'll be flattened like a plain from Geba even unto Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. Geba to Rimmon. Looks small on the map, but that's about 50 kilometers from Geba to Rimmon. Now, these days, it's mountainous, hilly countryside. Anyone who's been to Israel knows that this territory, this is the ridgeline that runs from Jerusalem down through Bethlehem, down through Hebron, flat. Amazing. It's hard to articulate or comprehend the scale of this earthquake. And it's absolutely impossible to exaggerate. And when I did these talks in the past, I used to try and illustrate it using nuclear bombs for scale. And I discovered the problem was that none of us have got first-hand experience with nuclear bombs. So it kind of didn't work. So, look, I can't do any better than to use God's own words to give us a picture of the vastness, of the scale of this earthquake. It will be like nothing the world has ever experienced, with the single exception of the flood. What did the flood do? How many people survived? More will survive this. Of that we can be absolutely confident, vastly more. But in terms of its impact and the way it's felt, come please to Isaiah 24. Just a show of hands, how many here have personally felt an earthquake? Not been in one while I was asleep and I didn't realize it happened. Personally been in one and felt an earthquake. So quite a few. And those of you who have been in an earthquake, there's different types of earthquakes. Some of you will have felt the jolting and thought, oh, wow, that was weird. For others of you, anyone felt the earthquake where the nature of the earthquake is that it warns you? You feel that kind of drumming in your chest before the earthquake strikes? So I grew up in New Zealand, and in New Zealand we have a particular type of earthquake. And as the earthquake comes, it sends a very, very low sound wave, a pulse that hits you. You don't feel it like shaking. You feel it here. It feels like fear. That's what it feels like. You just go, oh, why am I feeling so frightened? What? And then the shaking hits. It's a terrifying thing. And when you've been through it once or twice, you know it's coming. And the amazing thing, and this is what the scripture says again and again and again, there is nothing you can do at all. Nowhere you can go, nothing you can do. It's an earthquake. Isaiah 24. And it says, I'm just trying to find my place again, verse, for context, in Isaiah 24, let's look at verse 23, just so we know where we are, reassuring ourselves that this is a chapter that is in the right context. What does it say? Verse 23, then the moon will be confounded, the sun ashamed, when the Lord of armies shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before his ancients, the resurrected ones, gloriously. This is the right time zone. And what does it say? Verse 18, shall come to pass that he who flees from the noise of the fear, what I was just telling you about, shall fall into the pit, and he that cometh up out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in the snare, for the windows from on high are open, the foundations of the earth do shake, the earth is utterly broken down, the earth is clean dissolved, the earth is moving exceedingly, the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, shall be removed like a poorly constructed hovel that collapses in a strong wind. What an amazing day. Rotherham says, the earth breaketh, the earth crasheth, the earth tottereth. Come across a few pages. Chapter 30, Isaiah 30. And again, context so we know we're in the right zone. Verse 19, chapter 30. For the people shall dwell in Zion at Jerusalem. Thou shalt weep no more. He'll be very gracious unto thee, and to the voice of your cry he'll answer you. This is kingdom language for sure. Verse 25. And there shall be upon every high mountain and upon every high hill rivers. Sounds good, right? Streams of waters. In the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. Can you picture that? I mean, Adelaide doesn't have the tallest towers, but we all know of cities with very tall towers. Can you imagine the sight of those towers leaning slowly, faster, crashing into pieces along the streets? The city going dark. The fires starting. The sirens. The bridges down, the power lines down, the roads closed. The police officers can't get to their cars. The fire engines can't get where they need to get. Come across, I'll show you this one, Haggai chapter 2. Thus says Yahweh of armies, yet once, it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth, and the sea, and the dry land, and I will shake all nations. This is worldwide before the desire of all nations come. Heavens, earth, sea, land, a truly global earthquake, and to the best of my knowledge, there never has been one of those. The largest earthquake, I think, on record was 9.6 on the Richter scale. It's a logarithmic scale. That means every time it goes up one notch, it's going up what? Is it 10, 100? I can't remember. Someone who knows something about log will be able to tell me. But it doesn't just double, it grows exponentially. To go from 9.6 to 9.7 isn't just a little notch up. It's a massive increase in the power. The 9.6 earthquake, we didn't feel it in Australia. I mean, our seismologist knew it happened, but didn't get anyone out of bed. This one will be felt in every country in the world. I think this is perhaps the most telling verse for me. This one here, and you know this one really well. You've all been there, young people. You've seen this chapter. Have you read this verse? In my jealousy, in the fire of my anger have I spoken. In that day there will be a great shaking in the land of Israel. Get this, so that the people on the street can't stand up. No, so the fish of the sea and the fowls of the heaven shake at his presence, and all the other things. Oh, yeah, people on the street, fine. What does it take to rattle a fish? Okay, now what does it take to rattle a bird in flight? What an earthquake. And the mountains will be thrown down. The steep places will fall all around the world. Landslides, roads built to the edge of hills, collapsing down the precipice. Every wall shall fall to the ground. Years ago, a brother who worked at one of the universities went and spoke to one of the seismologists in the seismology department up in Queensland. He said to them, what would happen if there was an earthquake of a scale such and such in Israel? And he said there wouldn't be a 2-story building in the world that was not severely damaged. And it agrees with this. Hey, why does God use an earthquake? Well, it's because, you see, with hail, you can hide under cover, even big hail. With a hurricane, you can find shelter. With a flood, you move to high ground. But with an earthquake, humans have not found a way to deal with it. There's nothing they can do. And it will be the most humbling experience for a proud earth, the pride of the kingdom of men. All the king's tanks and all the king's guns, all the king's jets and all the king's aircraft carriers, Humpty Dumpty will still get broken. And he laughs these efforts to scorn. And as I was writing this down and thinking about it, you know, this part of the story, it's less vision and more nightmare, isn't it? It's horrible. There's a passage that says the slaughter of Yahweh will be from one end of the earth to the other, the dead of Yahweh from one end of the earth to the other. Millions, perhaps even billions, likely to perish in the seconds and then the hours and then the weeks that follows. But I find real comfort in the knowledge that our God is never, ever, ever indiscriminate. In another day of God's battle, in the time of Joshua, the earthquake destroyed the city in one blow. And yet, at the end of that, there was one section of the wall that stood tottering but still complete, like a finger pointing at the sky, declaring who did it. And on the top of that tiny spire of wall was Rahab and her family. And it will be exactly the same in this day. The redeemable will be redeemed. And God knows. And he will save those who can be saved. Of that we can be 100% certain. And so Gog's image, not equipped to deal with earthquakes or hail on the scale that we've talked about, or brimstone or lightning or fire or any of those things, falls. And they fall upon the mountains of Israel, and the next phase of the story begins. A vast effort begins to remove the ruins of this war. Ezekiel 39 talks about this. And it gives us a sense of the scale of this war, because it says that it's going to take 7 years for a group of dedicated weapons disposal experts to remove all of the weapons left by the soldiers who perished in and around Israel at this time. 7 years. Non-stop work, carting these weapons to bonfires on which they will be burnt and destroyed and removed. 7 years. And those that perish in this war, well, there's a graveyard, there's a mass cemetery established for them. It's just outside the land of Israel on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. It's going to be called the grave of the passengers, or the valley of the passengers. And people will walk through it as a sort of salient lesson on this is what happens with pride. A vast graveyard that goes on for miles and miles and miles. And who does this cleanup effort? Moving the bodies and moving the weapons and all of those things. Well, we're told that it's those that dwell in Israel will do it. Those who've been rescued from the barbaric tyranny of Gog's hatred. You see, what's happened is, as the shaking stops, the Jews in Jerusalem will be shaking the brick dust out of their hair. Many of them have been taken away into slavery, but some of them are still there, perhaps as slaves in the land, and they're just, what was that? And as they're just recovering their senses, they look up and they see the thing that Zechariah described, Yahweh, my God, coming. Well, we go to this, we sing this psalm all the time, but this is what this psalm is about. Lift up ye heads, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. And the chorus is, but who is he? We don't know who he is. We've never met him before. Yes, it's the Lord. It's the Lord, King, strong, mighty, the winner in the battle. That's the one. Lift up your everlasting doors and let him in. He's knocking. That's what that psalm's about. Isn't that wonderful? I love that perspective of this being a song sung by two groups, one of them inside Jerusalem who've just survived the earthquake, and they're looking out and seeing this amazing person coming towards them, and they're saying, who is he? I mean, we know he won the battle, but we don't know who he is. And we're shouting into Jerusalem saying, it's the King of glory. Open up the doors, let him in. And they will. And those ancient walls that have waited thousands of years for this man to arrive finally witness the Prince of Peace come in and be acknowledged. And they'll meet him and they will mourn as you would. Not just a lifetime wasted, hundreds of lifetimes wasted, thousands of years, when they see and look on him they pierced and they realize the grief they have given God. And the children of Israel in the land, called Judah commonly in the text, mourn and acknowledge the King. And meanwhile, elsewhere, the dust settles worldwide. And there's a brief period of global quiet as the shaken rulers of the world struggle to work out what just happened. Our army was there 1 minute and now we can't even phone them. And they work out what to do next, and everybody else is just digging themselves out, trying to work out where's the next meal coming from and what do I do for a job now? The world won't be left to ponder this question for very long. Isaiah 66, the context of Isaiah 66, the section we're looking at starts with this point about the chariots and the fire and the judgment and the anger. This is Armageddon. And just after that point in Isaiah 66, we come across a few verses in Isaiah 66, and it says this: I will set an ensign among them, and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations. And what to do? Well, verse 20 says, they will bring your brethren for an offering unto Yahweh out of all nations. So what happens is this. Armageddon's complete, and the great king in Jerusalem will send messengers out to the world's nations. The ambassadors of the state of Zion, and they will set a sign among the nations, a wonder. That is, they'll go out and they will declare, the one who won the war and sent me is a resurrected man. And he's got an army with him of resurrected people who cannot die. And they will declare the wonder of this victorious Savior, a 2,000-year-old Messiah, the Son of the living God. And they will go in front of all these governments. Can you imagine it? The opening of Parliament in whatever year it is. Whoever is the Prime Minister, and the first speech is from a rescued Jew. Because that's who he sends. That's what it says. It says he will send those that escape of the children of Israel out to the nations. Jews from the land rescued from a terrible individual and national fate. They will be the ones sent out to do what they were always meant to do. This is what Zion, the children of Israel, were meant to do always. To be a witness to the existence of a terrible and a wonderful God. And now they will do it. And they will demand of every country in the world a very particular gift of tribute. Very specific. There'll be a mark of submission that every country must give to Christ or declare war on Christ. And that is, they must return the Jews. That's what verse 20 says. And some nations will send their governments to witness for themselves the reality of Christ and his saints. Isaiah 66 verse 18 speaks about that, while others will stay away. And yet the ambassadors will still be sent to them too. So now the command has gone out. The word has gone out to every government in the world. Give up and give me my people. An appeal has been made. In the terms of Revelation, this is what's called the mid-heaven gospel proclamation. The gospel has been preached in that there's been good news. The kingdom of God is here and it's ruled by Jesus Christ. That's the two parts of the gospel, right? And it's mid-heaven because, well, it's being spoken to those who were previously in the kind of top bit of heaven, in a symbolic sense and revelation sense, but they're being pushed down because, well, who's in the top bit of heaven now? The heaven of heavens. Well, Christ and the saints are, and they are now just mid-heaven government rulers who receive this command. And so they're commanded that they must bow to Christ, and they're given great news. And the great news is your nation will flourish in the kingdom if you submit to the reign of Jesus Christ, the monarch of the new world order. And now what happens is this. Nothing. For a little while. Breathing time is granted to the world. Our King will pause. He's secure in Zion. He knows that nobody could or would attack him there. Not yet. He's secure in his dwelling place. And he will await the world's response. Isaiah says, all the inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth see ye when he lifts up the ensign on the mountains, the flag that says, I'm here. Time to bow to me. When you hear the blowing of that trumpet, hear this. For so the Lord has said, I will take my rest. I will consider in my dwelling place. And then he describes the building heat in summer, the dew, the sort of hot, sticky feeling of that summer heat building and building and building and building. That hot day. And we know it's going to rain. And when it's going to rain, it's really going to rain. There's going to be a storm, and everyone knows the storm is coming. We just don't know when, and every day is hotter than the last as the world waits. And Brother Thomas described this. I don't often love the phrasing of Brother Thomas. It's often hard to sort of get a grip on, but I want to read you what he says here because I really like it. Christ knows which nations will submit and which ones will resist, so he waits. And Brother Thomas says this about this period of waiting. During the stillness of this awful pause, not a gleam of sunshine for a moment penetrates the impending gloom. Not a breath stirs, not a leaf wags, not a blade of grass is shaken. No rippling wave curls upon the sleeping surface of the waters. The black, ponderous cloud covering the whole sky seems to hang fixed and motionless as an arch of stone. Nature itself seems benumbed in all its operations. Such is the condition of the torpid atmosphere before the bursting forth of a raging tempest, when instead of fearing God and giving glory to him, they assemble themselves together to give battle against the King of Kings. Because you see, even though Christ has sent them excellent news, and he has proven both his ability and his power to rule the world, they don't want it. Oh yes, there will be some nations that will bow and submit to Jesus Christ. But there will be many of the rulers of our globe, the presidents and the generals, the billionaires and the thought leaders, the heads of faith. During this period, they will be busy. Come across to Psalm 2. Let's have a look at what they're doing during this period, this lull before the storm. And again, we've read this psalm before, but here's what it's about. Psalm 2. Why do the nations rage? Why do the people imagine an empty thing? The kings of the earth set themselves. The rulers are taking counsel together against the Lord, against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder. Let's cast away their cords from them. They're conspiring, already bound as they are by his command. They conspire to resist against God and his anointed. Verse 6, God says, I have set my holy king, my king upon my holy hill in Zion. He's my son, the one who rules in Zion. That's who they're conspiring against. When he rules in Zion, they will come to an agreement, and they will be conspirators, these resisting allies. Isaiah 19 is set in the period just after Armageddon, the same time period, and it describes the king's adversaries as the following individuals: the beast, the kings of the earth, and the false prophet. Now, please don't take this excellent photo that I managed to find online of the Pope and his beast. I'm kidding. AI-generated picture. He didn't pose with that beast. I think he just has it as a pet. But the beast and the false prophet and the kings of this earth, we're told in Revelation, will resist Jesus Christ at this point in time. And it's no surprise really to discover that these are the groups that represent those resisting nations. That the representation here is of Western Europe, the beast, Central Europe, the kings of the earth, and of course, the false prophet, a specific pope. And these nations, they're really the heart of the Catholic dominion. This is the region most motivated by the false prophet, the pope of whatever age this occurs. Our age, we believe. Revelation 17 uses slightly different language to draw the same picture. Because in Revelation 17, he sees the woman, the beast, and 10 kings. And all we've done is we've swapped the false prophet for the woman. The symbols are the same, different symbols, same alliance. 10 kings allied with the beast that is ridden by the mother of harlots. We do not grind an axe against individual people of other faiths. We know that they have been lied to, and we are saddened for them, and we want to help them. But young people, know this. We hate the system that lies to these people because it's killing them. And here's the terrible thing. It knows it's doing this. It's known for hundreds of years that what it teaches is a lie, and it will immediately, on the return of Christ, start telling the story that the person who came to Jerusalem and destroyed a northern army and has started to build a temple and is ruling in peace, that's the Antichrist. And do you know how we know they will say that? Because they've been saying it for 300 years already, and you can watch the movie, and I'm not joking. They put out a movie about this that says exactly what I just said. That our king, when he rules in Jerusalem and destroys the Russians and rescues the Jews and starts building the temple, that guy's the Antichrist. All of the horrible pictures you've seen on screen representing that system are justified. Because they will start a long and terrible war, a war of deliberate resistance against God and against his Son. Revelation 14 describes this period as the winepress out of which blood flows. What a picture. What a horrible picture. Where Armageddon has a symbol of threshing, the grinding of grains of wheat, and then the blowing away of the chaff in the summer. This is different. Here's that representation. Daniel 2 talks about the threshing floors and the chaff. Isaiah 27 talks about the chaff of the mountains. Isaiah 17 says a symbol, that is Isaiah 17. So the war of Armageddon, it's a grinding and a blowing away, but this war is much more deliberate and personal and painful for both sides. The language of a winepress for this long war is expressive. It's gory, but expressive. And it also has coded into it clues for the timing of the war. You see, in Israel, in Bible times, the grape harvest and the pressing that followed right after the harvest of the grapes, or actually all the way through the harvest of the grapes, I should say, and the harvest of the wheat and the threshing, they occupied specific times in the calendar. And they also occupy very different durations of time. You see, the wheat harvest, well, it would be harvested pretty much in a single month, the month of Ziv in ancient Israel, in their calendar. And what would happen is they'd harvest the grain as fast as they can, and it would be left in the field in sheaves, piled up to dry. And then at the end of that process, it would all be gathered together once, and there'd be this great threshing at the end, very, very quickly done. All nations gathered, and then the threshing happens fast. A single month. And then after that, the next month, the grape harvest starts. And you know what? The grape harvest lasts for 4 months. And throughout that process, they don't just gather all the grapes and leave them there for 4 months and then squish them right at the end. No. Because then you've got stinky, horrible, moldy grapes. No, you have to press every single day. It's a different sort of involvement with this harvest. And you might be thinking, what's he doing? Why is he talking about this threshing and then about these grapes? We'll come to Revelation chapter 14. Because you see, Armageddon is described as threshing. The long war that follows is described as the grape harvest. Let me give you an example. Revelation 14 verse 15, another angel came out of the temple crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud and said, "Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." That speaks of Armageddon. There's a reaping. Verse 18, another angel comes and he too says, "Put in your sickle, for the clusters of the vine of the earth. Her grapes of wickedness, by the way, are fully ripened." So the angel does so and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. The winepress was trodden without the city for the space of 1,600 furlongs. So 2 symbols, threshing, Armageddon, grape harvest, pressing, the long war that follows. And you can see that they occupy 2 different periods of time. And I want you to notice the ratio. I think it's quite interesting. The ratio of 1 to 4 closely matches our suggested timeline, doesn't it? It fits very neatly with that timeline that we're suggesting. 40 years for the long war, a long war of attrition, a lifetime for many. And a very, very quick war for Armageddon. Oh yes, the gathering to Armageddon might take all 10 years, but the battle itself happens fast, right at the end, the threshing. Malachi chapter 4 and Joel chapter 2 verse 31 use a particular term to describe this period. They describe this period as the period that leads to the great day of Yahweh Almighty. I'll come to that in just a second. Just this point here, there is another indication that this long war will take 40 years. Apologies. And that is this number up here on the screen. It's the square of 40. 40 times 40 is 1,600. And 40 just happens to be a symbol that's used frequently in the Bible of testing and of judgment. Yes, it's going to be the period of testing of the world, and at the same time, it'll be the period of the testing of the children of Israel, which we'll come to in a moment. But as I said, Joel chapter 2 and Malachi describe this period as the period leading to the great and terrible day of Yahweh. The great and terrible day. And you might ask, well, that doesn't kind of make sense. Why does the great king, with all the power at his disposal, not just send another earthquake against them, or a volcano or something, and just do it quick, right? Then we can start the kingdom. That'd be the easiest way. In our terms, why doesn't he just go nuclear on them, huh? Finish that war fast. Why let it drag on for 40 long, terrible years? And the answer is because they've got his people. And they refuse to let them go. This is a repeat of the Pharaoh story all over again. And so this long, agonizing war of attrition at least for one side, grinds on and on and on, with the Jews serving as hostages and human shields, held by the beast and the 10 kings, all led by the mother of harlots, Jezebel, the chaste one who could not die. They threw her down and the dogs ate her, and somehow she's still alive at the end of time. And there's something wonderful about the fact that our king's selection, his choice of who to send to manage this appeal to the nations at the start, that appeal that they would gift to the king, to Jesus Christ, all of the global Jewry. The person who Christ asked to do this. And then when that appeal fails, at least in those countries where the churches grow the tallest, the person who will lead the expeditionary force that will fight their way into these nations to help the Jews fight their way back out again is a man with first-hand experience of fighting Jezebel. A man who has first-hand experience of using weather as a weapon. A man who's got first-hand experience of calling fire down from heaven and of slaying false prophets all the time. A man who met with Christ at the Transfiguration with Moses to discuss the subject of exoduses, and yet at that point had never even been involved in one. And Israel were promised that Elijah, the prophet, would come before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Malachi 4 verse 5. And it's he who will both fight this war and rescue scattered Jewry. He will be the one who will rescue Abraham's seed from the ends of the earth. This is a project that, like Moses' mission, will take 40 years that will result in a devastated Europe wasted by the new plagues. Perhaps enough for each king to have one of his own, given there are 10 of them. 40 years that will result in a purged and purified people ready to enter the land of God, the land that God promised Abraham forever. Now, if any of you have quickly read through Malachi chapter 4, it's hard not to conclude that Elijah is to be sent before Armageddon, not some other time. But when we look closely both at Malachi and at the passages that refer to Elijah's work, a pattern clearly emerges. And I'm just going to show you 4 of those passages. There are hundreds, brothers and sisters. This is one of the most spoken about subjects in the Bible. But here we go. Joel chapter 2. Here's what comes afterwards. It shall come to pass afterwards, pretty clear when it is, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. And this all happens before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Right? We're going to go back about 10 verses, and here's what happens 10 verses earlier. I will remove from you the northern army. I will drive him into a land barren and desolate, with his face towards the east sea and his hinder part towards the utmost sea, and his stink will come up, because he'll die there. That's Armageddon. This is where Elijah goes out. Before, after. Okay, let's have a look at another one. Here's the afterwards. Isaiah 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will set his hand upon, again the second time, as in the second time after the wilderness wanderings, to recover the remnant of his people which will be left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Hamath, from the islands of the sea, from everywhere. What happens before? Here's what happens before. Verses earlier. They will not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, because Christ has conquered that holy mountain. It's now its capital city. That's what happens before. Here's another one. Isaiah 43. Now, thus says the Lord that created thee, fear not, I'm with thee. I will bring your seed from the east, from the west, from the north, from the south. I will bring my sons from far, my daughters from the very ends of the earth. That's what happens afterwards. Let's go back a whole chapter. There's a flow between these chapters. You can check it later. The Lord will go forth as a mighty man. He will stir up jealousy as a man of war. He shall cry, he shall roar, he shall prevail. His fury and his strength will be seen in the battle. This is Armageddon. Armageddon before, gathering of jury afterwards. The work of Elijah. Last one. Zephaniah. We don't go to Zephaniah very often. I will gather my people from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed. That's what happens afterwards. Here's what happens before. I will gather nations that I might pour out my indignation upon them. The point is this. Armageddon first, then the work of Elijah. Going out to save the children of Israel. He has already rescued the children of Judah in the land, the children of Israel. Worldwide jury will be collected. We might say, okay, fair enough. But Malachi 4 supports this. Malachi 4 has the same idea. You can turn there if you want, but we're not going to turn it up. In Malachi 4 verse 1, he begins with a day of judgment where the wicked are like the product of the wheat harvest. And in verse 5, afterwards Elijah comes. Before the day, the great and terrible day. So the great and terrible day is the language of the long war, not of Armageddon. And hopefully, by the way, you're starting to see the volume of passages that discuss this period. It's one of the most addressed prophetic subjects. Now, Elijah's mission is not just a functional one. It's not just a mission to communicate with a shattered world and to recover scattered jury. Most of all, his mission is spiritual. Here's what Malachi 4, verse 5 and 6 says. Behold, I send you Elijah before the great and terrible day to do what? To turn hearts. The hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. It's about hearts. It's about conversion and change. And when John was being born, an angel came and explained John's mission to Zechariah. And what the angel did is he repurposed Malachi's prophecy to explain John's work to Zechariah, John's father. And what that did is it gave us insight into what Malachi was originally saying. Malachi was originally saying that Elijah's work will be to turn the children's hearts towards their God so their hearts become like the heart of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The job of Elijah will be to prepare a people ready for the king. And so just as Moses had to rescue a trapped people on one hand and convert a faithless nation, so Elijah will have to do likewise. And let's come to our reading. Ezekiel chapter 20. And for those of you worrying, yes, we're getting close to the end. Here's what Elijah will do in his long war. Ezekiel chapter 20. In the long war, he's going to both fight the long war and rescue a nation's spirituality. Those two things are intertwined. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 33 illustrates this. As I live, says the Lord God, surely with a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm, with fury poured out, will I rule over you. I will bring you out from the people. I will gather you out of the countries wherein you are scattered with a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out. God wishes to bring his people into a wilderness once again, and yet this requires his mighty hand and his fury poured out as Elijah and his assistants fight alongside the rescued flocks of Jews to fight their way out from among the people, wherever they may be. It's an inverted war. This is a back-to-front war, an upside-down one, because it's fought from the inside out. As in many nations, the pattern that was established by Pharaoh is repeated again with a refusal to let Elijah's people go, and an intensification of the oppression, the cruelty, the hate, the doubling down of the impact upon the Jews as the plague started to bite. And the persecution will begin as it always does. There'll be trivial sanctions and rules on the Jews. And the diaspora will be convinced that maybe we don't really want to leave. We like it here. It's okay. This is our home. But daily new discriminatory laws will be added. There'll be the rise of hate crime, the blind eyes of law enforcement, the media, the propaganda, the riots, and then the lynchings. It will be the same all over again. And it says it. Look at this. Here's some passages for you. Jeremiah chapter 30, alas, for that day is great so that there is none like it. It's the time of Jacob's trouble, but he'll need to be saved from it, and he will. None like it. Elijah sent before the great and terrible day. Terrible for who? When the kingdom of men threatens God's people and challenges Christ's command. It shall come to pass in that day that the great trumpet shall be blown, and they shall come which were ready to perish. That's how bad this is for the Jews. The escapees are described as ready to perish. In Isaiah 49, they're described as prisoners in darkness. Isaiah 50 talks about the anger of the nations. They've been oppressed together. You know what happens? When the Jews are sent out as messengers to say, let my people go, some of the nations capture the messengers too. So dark and so hateful is their abomination of Jewry. But Elijah will bring them out, as it says in our reading, with a mighty hand, with outpoured fury, to a wilderness away from the people. Verse 35, I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, away from the people. And there will I plead with you face to face, like as I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. So will I plead with you, says your God. And he will begin that process of conversion, the work of the still small voice. Out there in the wilderness, Elijah will speak to their hearts. Here's what this chapter means. Comfort ye. That's what he'll say to them. He'll comfort them. The voice in the wilderness: prepare the way of the Lord. Make a straight path to Jerusalem. In these places of solitude, the saints will work with Jewry. And finally, under the guidance of Elijah, this is not a fast process. This is a process that's going to take years, even decades. Their hearts will change, a new heart, a new spirit. And a different nation will emerge from that wilderness, one that is going and weeping and seeking their Lord and desiring a perpetual covenant. Can you imagine this? Years of quiet education to a people either godless or law-locked. Can you imagine the miracles to feed this nation, some 5 million people, if only a third survive, manna and quail, streams of water from the rock? We'll be doing these miracles as they walk from the ends of the world. Can you imagine the work to explain the King to these people? Groups coming from all corners of the globe, led, fed, protected by us. And while some are involved in this quieter work, others of us remain in Europe fighting that war. And so the plagues will fall upon the beast and upon the kings and upon great Jezebel, reducing Babylon the Great from the world's most enduring and powerful organization to a dark and poverty-filled shell, broken, isolated, alone. And then one day, almost 50 years after that moment, after the knock on the door and the hand on your shoulder the front door left open, and the aircon still on. 50 years on, big power bill. Perhaps there will be some here who will stand to witness as Elijah the prophet, now a practitioner of the still small voice, stands perhaps near where the Tiber enters the sea, near Rome, and he lifts a rock like a millstone and he casts it into the sea, as behind him with a great grinding crash, the caldera under Rome opens up and swallows Babylon the Great. Perhaps, or perhaps not, but this will happen. Days or weeks later, the prophet will lead a saved and changed nation across the Jordan, and as they cross the plain towards the slope above which towers Mount Zion, snow-capped, they will pass through the valley of Achor. And to me, nothing could make the valley Achor more hopeful than as they pass through that valley, Achan himself was there to greet them. Can you imagine that? What a story of redemption and of forgiveness. Can you see it, brothers and sisters? May the winds be favourable.